They say love is about sacrifice. But they don't tell you what to do when the person you sacrificed for says you never gave enough. That's the part they leave out. I remember the first time I told my friends I was giving up bacon. It was a lazy Sunday morning, and we were at Jimmy's Diner, our spot since college. Same booth, same waitress, same greasy comfort. I ordered an omelette, no sausage, no bacon. The silence at that table was louder than any joke they'd cracked that day. One of the guys said, "Wait, are you serious? Since when do you say no to pork?" I smiled. Told him it was part of the changes I was making, for Mira. And back then, it felt right. I was in love. Deep, stupid, hopeful love. The kind that makes you say yes before you even understand what the question really is. We met at a mutual friend's wedding. She was in this gold and burgundy sari that shimmered every time she turned her head. I was smitten before I knew her name. And when we talked, God, it was easy. Like we were picking up a conversation that started years ago. She told me early on that her faith mattered. That her culture wasn't just something she celebrated, it was something she lived. I respected it. Admired it, even. There was a calm in her, a discipline, that made me want to slow down and learn. So I did. I learned to eat vegetarian on the weekends. I read up on her holidays. I asked questions, clumsy ones sometimes, but I cared. And when we got serious, I made some big decisions. I gave up pork. Stopped drinking. No more Christmas tree. No more beer at ball games. No more smoked ribs at my uncle's cookouts. And honestly, it was hard at first. But I adapted. Not perfectly, not overnight, but I showed up. I thought that mattered. The thing is, Mira never asked me to convert. Not directly. She said it was my choice. That what mattered most was respect, effort, support. And I gave all three. When we got married, I sat through hours of ceremonies I didn't understand, smiling and sweating under a ceremonial scarf, repeating vows in a language I could barely pronounce. Her family flew in from India, vibrant and loud and full of this affectionate chaos I wasn't used to, but I leaned in. I danced. I tried. I belonged, at least in the way an outsider can, when they're willing to listen more than they talk. For a while, we were good. We had our routines. Our rituals. Our own quiet rhythm. But over time, something started shifting. And not in the way most people expect. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a betrayal. It was 1,000 little moments that started feeling like rejection wrapped in politeness. When her aunt visited and spoke only in Tamil at the dinner table, even though she knew English. When Mira started attending more community events alone, saying I'd be more comfortable sitting this one out. When I overheard her telling a friend on the phone that sometimes she felt like she was living with a guest. That one stayed with me. Deep. A guest. In my own marriage. The final crack came last month. We were sitting on the couch, quiet night, something forgettable playing on TV, when she told me her cousin Rohan was flying in from Chennai. He'd be staying with us for a while. I didn't mind. I'd met Rohan on video calls. Seemed nice enough. Friendly. A little intense. What I didn't expect was how quickly everything would change once he arrived. Mira lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. They spoke for hours in their language, inside jokes flying like arrows across the room. I'd try to join in, but it felt like stepping into a play halfway through Act 3. I started staying later at work. Started finding reasons to be busy. And then, last Saturday, she said it. I think we should talk. There's a certain kind of silence that fills the room right before a marriage cracks. It's not loud, not chaotic. It's the quiet that settles when one person has already made their decision, and the other is still flipping through memories trying to find where things went wrong. That was the silence in our living room when Mira sat down across from me and said we needed to talk. I turned off the TV. She reached for the edge of her sleeve, fidgeting the way she does when she's trying to stay composed. I braced myself, for what, I wasn't sure. Maybe something about Rohan overstaying his welcome. Maybe a conversation about her work stress. I wasn't ready for what came next. She looked me in the eyes, but gently, like she was trying not to break something already delicate. "I think I want a divorce," she said. Just like that. No anger. No drama. Just a statement of fact, like she was telling me she needed more almond milk. I didn't respond right away. I felt the words echo in my chest before they landed in my ears. Then she added, "You've been good to me. Kind. Supportive. But I don't think you ever really embraced my culture." And that's when I felt the first real sting, not from the word divorce, but from everything she poured into the silence that followed. I asked her what she meant. She said I'd been respectful, yes. Accommodating, sure. But that I never immersed myself in her world. That I was always orbiting it, never quite inside. "You learned the rules," she said. "But you didn't learn the meaning." She talked about how lonely she felt at temple events, explaining everything to me like a tour guide. About how she longed for someone who could recite the mantras with her instead of watching quietly from the corner. How she missed hearing her language at home without having to translate every word. How she dreamed of raising children who would grow up in a house filled with the same rhythms she was raised in, and how she wasn't sure I could be the one to help build that. And then, almost like an afterthought, she said something I can't forget. "Rohan, he understands those things without me having to explain." Now let me pause there, because I know how that sounds. It would be easy, too easy, to say this was about another man. About a cousin stepping in and pulling her away. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about Rohan. It was about her. About how she'd been shrinking inside this marriage, quietly, while I thought we were doing okay. And yeah, it hurt. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. I gave up things for her, pork, Christmas, beer. I did it willingly. Thoughtfully. I didn't fake anything. But maybe I did treat her world like a checklist. Like a to-do list of cultural compromises instead of a space I could grow roots in. She wanted someone who belonged to that world, not just someone who respected it. And as much as I hated to admit it, I'd always held on to pieces of myself in case I got lost in hers. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone. No music. No light except for the stove clock glowing 1:04 a.m. And I remembered something from our early days, how she once said her father used to wake up at dawn to light incense and offer prayers, and how the smell of sandalwood always made her feel safe. And it hit me, I'd spent years lighting candles to keep the darkness away from our marriage, but never once thought to light incense with her. I once heard a therapist say that the saddest part of most breakups isn't the end itself, it's how long one person was already gone before they finally said it out loud. That thought haunted me as I sat alone in the kitchen the morning after Mira told me she wanted a divorce. She was still asleep upstairs, or maybe just pretending to be. I couldn't blame her. When you've been holding something heavy for that long, saying it out loud is like letting go of a breath you didn't know you were holding. But me? I was still choking on it. I spent the whole morning going through our wedding album. Not to torture myself, but because I needed to see something, anything, to remind me that we had, at one point, stood on the same side of the glass. There we were, side by side, under the mandip, garlands around our necks. My suit was wrinkled from the heat. She was glowing, looking at me like I was the only thing worth seeing in the whole crowd. I wasn't imagining that. I know I wasn't. I needed to believe it wasn't all pretend. That we hadn't just drifted apart, but maybe we could find our way back. So I made a decision. One last try. That afternoon, I called a friend from work, Zaid. Muslim guy, born in Pakistan but raised here. He once mentioned a teacher he knew who offered intro classes on South Asian spiritual traditions and interfaith understanding. I asked if he still had that teacher's number. He did. I signed up for 2 sessions, starting the following weekend. Not because I thought a couple of classes could undo years of emotional drift. But because if I was going to lose this marriage, I needed to know I had fought with open hands, not closed fists. I also texted her that night, just one line. I want to understand, even if it's late. She didn't reply right away. But the next morning, she placed a book on the kitchen counter. It was Bhagavad Gita, a new translation. She didn't say anything. Just left it there, like a breadcrumb. That week, I started waking up before sunrise. Not to copy her rituals, but to be present. To sit in the quiet she'd once told me brought her peace. I lit incense. Bought it from the little Indian grocery store down the street. Same brand her dad used to burn, she said once. I didn't tell her I was doing it. I just let the scent speak for itself. Some nights, I sat on the back patio reading from the Gita, not understanding every word, but trying, really trying, to feel what she felt. That stillness. That connection to something deeper. And for a few moments each night, I did. It didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt like stretching muscles I didn't know I had. But while I was slowly waking up to what I'd missed, Mira was pulling further away. She was home less. Dinner with Rohan and some of his friends from the community, she'd say. Or, helping him settle in. I started to notice little things. She wore a different bindi now, more traditional, deeper red. Something she hadn't worn since our early days. Her playlists changed. Her clothes changed. Even her laugh changed. Not that she was becoming someone else. But maybe, she was becoming more of who she always was. And I started to wonder if all these years, I'd been the one slowing her down without realizing it. Then came the night I finally said it. Is it him? She didn't flinch. She didn't lie. She didn't say yes, either. She just looked at me and said, he reminds me of home. Not passion. Not romance. Not temptation. Home. And somehow, that word hurt more than anything else could have. Because I realized, I had built her a house. But I'd never built her a home. If I had to point to one moment, one single, vivid moment when I knew for sure this marriage was slipping beyond my reach, it was during Diwali. We never used to celebrate it much, not at first. I mean, she did growing up, of course. Lights, sweets, prayers, music, all of it. But in our home, it started small. A few candles on the windowsill, maybe a mithai box from the Indian store. The kind of gesture that says, I see you, even if I didn't fully understand. But this year was different. This year, she went all in. It started a week before. The house got cleaned top to bottom, like she was sweeping away not just dust but old disappointments. New saris showed up in garment bags. Boxes of clay lamps arrived from Amazon. Rohan helped hang string lights across the front porch. I watched from the window, coffee in hand, as the two of them laughed like childhood never ended. I could have gone out to help. But something about the way they moved, the ease, the rhythm, it made me feel like I'd be stepping onto a dance floor without knowing the steps. Like I'd be noticed more for trying than for staying out of the way. So I didn't. And that might have been my mistake. The night of the festival, the house looked like something out of a movie. Warm golden light in every room. Candles flickering against the walls. Mira looked radiant, hair pulled back, gold earrings, deep maroon sari that shimmered when she moved. She barely touched her phone. She didn't have to. Everyone she wanted was already there. Her family came. Her friends. Rohan's friends, too. And me? I played host. Handed out plates. smiled, laughed in the right places. I did what a good husband's supposed to do. But inside, I was folding. There was a moment, mid-evening, when everyone gathered in the living room for prayer. Mira led it. She stood tall, voice steady, as she offered her arti to the deities. Everyone followed her lead, hands together, eyes soft with reverence. I stood in the back, just out of view, unsure whether to join. I didn't want to disrespect the moment by pretending to understand what I didn't. And then Rohan stepped forward, just behind her, and joined the prayer like it was as natural as breathing. They looked like they'd done this together for years. That's when something inside me sank. Not in jealousy, but in recognition. This is what she meant. This is what she'd been asking for, silently, for years, not gestures, not polite support, not compromises. Companionship. One that didn't need subtitles. After the guests left, and the house was quiet again, I stood in the kitchen rinsing out glasses. Mira walked in, still barefoot, hair loosened from the pins. She looked tired, but not in the way she used to after our long days. This was the kind of tired that comes from joy. From fulfillment. She leaned against the counter, watching me for a long second. Then she said, "You did great tonight." I smiled, but something in me twisted. So I asked, gently, "Did I feel like your husband tonight? Or just the guy who set the table?" She didn't answer. She just looked down at her hands, turning her wedding ring slowly like she was trying to decide if it still fit. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me. I thought about every holiday I'd skipped. Every moment I said, "You go, I'll stay back." Every time I chose comfort over connection. And I realized that trying was never the problem. The problem was that I was always a few steps behind. And eventually, that gap becomes a canyon no one knows how to cross. It came in a plain envelope. No drama. No big speech. Just a manila folder on the edge of the kitchen counter one rainy Thursday morning. I saw it before I saw her. Inside were the papers. Divorce, petition, the whole thing. Neatly clipped. Signature lines marked in yellow. Next to it, a note in her handwriting. "This isn't because I stopped loving you. It's because I started loving the parts of me I had been putting away." I stood there, just staring. Couldn't bring myself to touch it. Like if I left it unopened, it might not be real. Like it was just a bad dream tucked between the mail and the grocery list. I heard her footsteps behind me. Soft, careful. She didn't try to hide the tension anymore. We were past that stage, past pretending that, maybe we just need a weekend away, would fix what had already fractured. She walked into the room, calm but pale. You could tell she hadn't slept. I turned to face her. She didn't flinch. Just looked at me the way people do when the storm has passed but the debris is still on the lawn. "I wanted to talk through it," she said, voice gentle. "Not just leave it there like a punch in the gut. But I didn't know how else to do this without making it harder." I nodded. I appreciated the honesty, even as it scraped me raw. I asked her one question, "Is it Rohan?" She shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "It's not about him. It's about me finally seeing what I kept hoping would just change." She paused, like she wanted to find the least cruel way to phrase it. "You were always kind. Always supportive. But I felt like I was dragging you through my world, step by step, explaining everything, while part of you was still waiting to go back to yours." I didn't argue. Because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. I remembered the first time we talked about kids. She said she wanted them to speak Tamil, to know her deities, to fast on holy days and feel proud, not apologetic. She wanted a home filled with the kind of color and sound she grew up with, rangoli on the floor, chants in the morning, rice sweetened with jaggery in the evenings. And I said, of course. I meant it. But maybe I didn't understand it. Maybe what I thought was support felt more like tolerance to her. And maybe, just maybe, she started to believe she deserved more than tolerance. She deserved belonging. That night, I signed the papers. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally understood what love had asked of me, and how long I'd been offering it in the wrong language. After I signed, she sat across from me and said one last thing. You were my safe place when I needed to leave home. But now I want a home that doesn't need translation. It wasn't said with spite. It was said with grief. And love. And a kind of clarity that breaks your heart but leaves it open. She moved out 2 weeks later. Rohan helped. Of course he did. But he didn't gloat. Didn't rub it in. In fact, he barely looked me in the eye. Maybe because he knew. Maybe because he'd seen it coming, too. The night she left, I walked through the house alone. The string lights from Diwali were still up in the hallway. Her favorite incense still lingered in the living room. And I stood there, in the silence, realizing I had never really been part of this home. I was a guest who stayed too long, hoping someone would hand me a key that was never mine to keep. It's been 8 months since Mira left. The house is quieter now. No incense in the mornings. No clatter of bangles on the bathroom counter. No late-night hum of Tamil melodies playing softly while she worked. Just the familiar creaks of floorboards and the steady hum of solitude. I kept the lights up a while longer, those Diwali string lights. Partly because I didn't want to face the blankness. Partly because, in some strange way, they felt like the last traces of her warmth. Eventually, though, I took them down. Not out of anger. Out of respect. You can't stay in someone else's story forever, not without losing your own voice. For a while, I disappeared into the routine, work, gym, sleep. Friends tried to pull me out of it. Dinners. Drinks. Game nights. They meant well. But it's hard to laugh when your heart is still standing barefoot in a house full of candles, watching a life you built turn to smoke. But grief has layers. And if you sit with it long enough, it teaches you things. It taught me that there's a difference between changing for someone and growing with them. I did the former. Mira wanted the latter. Looking back, I think I wanted to be her yes man. The one who never pushed back, who adapted and folded and tucked myself into the corners of her world without making noise. But love doesn't work that way. It's not about who sacrifices more, it's about who shows up, whole. It's about who's willing to build something new together instead of one person folding themselves into the shape of the other's life. I gave up pork, beer, Christmas. I read the Gita. I lit incense and watched her pray. I tried. And I thought that meant I was all in. But she didn't need a man who tried to orbit her world. She needed someone who felt it as home. And me? I was still peeking in the windows. About a month ago, I ran into her sister at a bookstore. She was browsing cookbooks, looking for something to bring to a temple potluck. She saw me, gave a small smile, soft, but not sad. Said Mira was doing well. Said she was teaching kids now. Storytelling and language lessons. Said she was happy. I nodded, smiled, meant it. Then she said, she told me you were good to her. Just not, hers. I thanked her for saying that. It was kind. It was also true. These days, I still light incense some mornings. Not out of habit. Not to conjure the past. But because I've come to like the quiet it brings. The ritual of slowing down. Of breathing. I started journaling, too. And one entry I wrote stuck with me. Sometimes we love someone by becoming what they need. But sometimes, the greatest love is in letting them go find it. I haven't seen Mira since she moved out. Haven't tried to. And she hasn't reached out, either. But if she ever did, if we crossed paths one day down the road, I think I'd thank her. Not because she left, but because she loved me enough to want more than a performance. She wanted something real. And her leaving forced me to find what that actually means. One last thing. I finally took down the wedding photo in the hallway. The one with us under the mandip, all light and color and hope. I didn't put it away out of bitterness. I wrapped it carefully, placed it in a storage box in the closet. Because that moment, it mattered. It was real. Even if it didn't last. Some things don't need to stay on the wall to be remembered. Some stories are beautiful, even if they end.